But gentlemen, we're also pretty excited here because after the long weekend, we are now heading into the Canadian Championship semifinal round. We have 2 MLS teams in there. We have 2 CPL teams. Let's begin with the first matchup right now, which will be CF Montreal and Forge, because it's a doubleheader on May 24th. They're going to kick things off first before Pacific and Vancouver Whitecaps take it away for the late game. How do you feel, Ollie, about Forge's form heading into this semifinal?
I mean, you have to feel pretty good, still unbeaten on the season, right? And watching One Nation yesterday with Bobby Smeliotis, like I tweeted a clip out of the question he answered on the starts of the season and basically how maybe the CPL's changes to the regular season and the playoff structure has kind of influenced that. And he said it has, and you can see that, right? It's a Forge team that I think is approaching this part of the season differently to how they have done before. They want points on the board. They want to lead the league the whole way here and get that regular season title and the Champions League spot and the playoff implications that comes with it. And so we're seeing a team that I think at this time of year is a bit less experimental than usual, a bit more focused than usual, trying to make sure that they get points on the board, get results early on. And maybe it's not so much just about building your performances and building the team for the end of the season. So I think that obviously influences how you feel about them coming into a Canadian Championship semi-final. I think they feel focused, ready. They look it on the pitch in terms of the way they're playing right now. And it makes this one a really intriguing tie. So this is a strong Forge team. So much depth, so much ability to rotate, which they did on Friday night. Didn't get the result they wanted, but they should be in a good place coming into this semi-final. And I think it makes it a really intriguing tie against the Montreal team that has improved, but still certainly has flaws and vulnerabilities.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ollie, but our good friend Kristen Jack on our Canadian Premier League coverage on the weekend said that this is the biggest week in Canadian Premier League history based upon these Canadian Championship games.
Whoa.
Which took me a little bit by surprise, but I kind of agree with KJ when it comes to that. Let's see if both Forge and Pacific can take a step forward. And focusing on Forge, they need to make amends for what was one of the poorest performances I've seen them put forward last year against CF Montreal in a 3-0 loss in this competition. I know it was CF Montreal's, best season on record. They had a great team, but the team that they played that day wasn't full of all the big dogs. It was very much a second team for CF Montreal who handled Forge with relative ease. But Forge that day didn't have Pacias playing, didn't have Borges, didn't have Sissoko, Morgan, James, 2 players that have come in at the back as well. They were too easy to break down, and Forge almost looked like deer caught in the headlights. How much have they grown from that time? Because they're going to Montreal again. They're playing on the grass. They don't have the advantage of home field on turf. How much have they grown from that experience? I would say this season they look to be a better team. I mean, they haven't lost yet. They've typically gotten off to slow starts to their CPL seasons. The one thing that they haven't shown, aside from the game against Valor and the CanChamp game against Laval, that killer instinct, that finish, that little bit of class, being a little bit more clinical in nature in the attacking third. They need to take their chances in this game against CF Montreal, because although this isn't the best CF Montreal team that we've seen in this competition, they're still young. They still have some talent. They're still a very competitive side. And they will be for Forge playing in this game at home. I think that if this game was being played in Hamilton, I'd be a little bit more encouraged by what Forge can do. Having to travel to Montreal, play on grass, play on a natural surface. We'll see what the game looks like when it slows down and whether it works in the favor of the home side or the away team.
Yeah, we'll see what kind of Forge also shows up, because when we had a chance to speak to Bobby there on One Nation, he did bring up the fact as well that they even took Toronto FC to penalty kicks, as we know, when that 2020 final had to be replayed a year or so later.
In Hamilton. That Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton is a
different beast
for this.
Of course it is. It's a different beast, that's for sure. But it's a great interview with Bobby. If you missed it, make sure to go to the OneSoccer YouTube channel and watch it, because he also, when we asked him what was more important to win between CPL regular season and the CPL title and the Canadian Championship, he's like, this year, it's really all about that Canadian Championship. So that this is something they've been building towards. This is their focus. And we wonder right now if CF Montreal is primed for the picking, because even though they went on this 6-game winning streak and they were playing some inspired football, they have now lost a couple in a row. So they fell 2-1 to New York Red Bull on the weekend. They had just 5 shot attempts. So their second straight loss. Yeah, so a bit of a dud. But do you think, Wheels, that right now they're vulnerable for another Canadian Canadian Championship upset here.
They're vulnerable because they're not that good. Like the 6-game winning streak, they played a bunch of lesser likes or never have beens. Like go through their 6 games and you can make an argument they were outplayed in more than half of them, but they managed to come away with results. And full credit to them because it's really helped their standing in the table and provided a little bit of inspiration that they can go on and do something. But make no mistake here, Hernan Losada said this about CF Montreal as well, is that this is their number one priority, winning the Canadian Championship. He said that this club needs a trophy. These players need a trophy. It's also your way in, one of the routes in, and their most likely route in to the CONCACAF Champions League next year. I see them playing, well, if it's not a full-strength squad, just about a full-strength squad. Look, I still don't think that they're a great MLS side. But against Forge, they should be very competitive in this game, and you know that the focus is going to be on winning this contest. So, yeah, although I commended them for that win streak, I mean, judge them based upon how they played in the competition they played against.
Yeah, I think part of it in the past couple of games as well has been they've looked a little bit like they've run out of steam. And the schedule over the past couple of weeks has started to build up a little bit. Obviously, they had 2 midweek games in back-to-back weeks. Firstly, in the Canadian Championship against TFC, and you start to look at some of the minutes that are adding up. Like Campbell started all 4 games. Camacho, Chouanier, 4. Herrera, Lassiter, Corbo all started 3, as well as Joel Waterman. So that's something that you look at in this game that could potentially be an advantage or something in Forge's favor, is that not only did they play Friday night and have had the extra day's rest coming into this game, they've also just played less over the past couple of weeks, and could be fresher for this match. So that's something to watch out for. I think obviously you have to make Montreal favorites after watching the way this game went last time. Well, you know, as Will says, it was a Forge side that just looked outclassed. What I would say is that has been kind of the exception, not the rule, with Forge in big matches. Like that's pretty much the only big match Forge has played in its history, and they've played plenty of them, where I can think of that they've come out and just laid a real egg. And that includes some away games in CONCACAF, not just home games at Tim Hortons Field. So you're hoping that is kind of an exception and isn't repeated again. And if that's the case, we should have a really competitive game on our hands. But they've certainly got something to prove, again, going away from their home environment and playing an MLS team on the road.
I think the center back position is huge for them too. Having Mendrikar James, like last year, their only real center back in that game was Alexander Ashinodi Janssen, who we all know did a great job playing as a center back last year. But for me, he's more suited to being a central midfield or playing with that, you know, commandeering like center back with experience, which could be in combination with James for this game. So I think they'll be a little bit more assured at the back for this game. And I think there's players on better form. Sissoko is one of the top players in the Canadian Premier League right now. Pacius brings more to the table than what Campbell and Welshman did leading the line last year. So it's a different looking Forge side. I think that they're going to be much better. It's just, we'll see what the team that Hernan Losada names. Like Wanyama hasn't played in this competition. He played on the weekend. If he's left out, you know, he is still at this, you know, this latter stage of his career. He's a stabilizing force in the midfield, especially with Samuel Piet out of the team. We all know the quality in Forge's midfield, and we could see a little bit of a advantage there for Forge. So we'll see how it plays out. I think this game is going to be extremely competitive, Andy. I don't think it's going to be a 3-0. I think it could go 1 goal either way in this game. There's not going to be much to it. So it's going to be a really good test and a really good opportunity for Canadian Premier League team to punch their ticket to a Canadian champ final, doing it the long way. Like 2020, just going into a 1-game final, like doing it the long way and getting there. I mean, this is a big hill to climb. They're just about there. And what an opportunity for Forge on Wednesday.
All right, so I'm hearing you guys kind of like this matchup. It's going to boil down to the details and probably who makes the fewer mistakes. So when it comes to Forge in particular, because this would be what we would see as history, to your point, and, you know, going the long way to the final and then possibly seeing for the first time ever a non-MLS team winning. Give me your 3 keys for a Forge victory, Ollie.
3 keys. Eat well, get a good night's sleep. Listen to
your take your vitamins, brother. Who are you, Hulkamania?
I think all the essentials. I think with Forge, it's pretty obvious, and Bobby's talked about it. Like, they have to be clinical in front of goal, and that's the one thing that you can maybe slight this team with at times, is that they control games, particularly in the CPL at home, like we saw Friday night, but they don't punish teams enough. They have the players to do it. I think when you look at Pacius and Hamilton and Campbell, it's the best cast of strikers they've ever had, but it still doesn't always happen. And I think against a Montreal team that has probably had success in that winning streak, trying to create quite low event games, be defensively solid, don't have too many chances either way, I think it could be that kind of match, and Forge are obviously going to need to take the opportunities that come their way.
Don't you think it's going to be interesting how this game is played? Because Montreal's at their best when they're playing on the counter.
Yeah.
And Forge is at their best when they're on the ball. I just don't think that Forge can take chances here and leave themselves open to the counterattack and some of the pace of the likes of a 4 in attack. If they leave themselves wide open, I think they're asking for trouble. But are Forge willing to suffer, give up the ball at times, give it to CF Montreal and say, break us down going the other way? I'm really not quite sure how this game is going to play out from a tactical perspective, to be honest with you.
That's why we're going to watch on OneSoccer. The other match has Pacific FC taking on Vancouver Whitecaps. A couple of years ago, Pacific dispatched Vancouver in the Canadian Championship. But let's first talk about them individually here, Ollie, because when it comes to Pacific, they're unbeaten in their last 4 matches. They only trail Forge by 1 point in the CPL standing. So before we even get to the Canadian Championship, do you think Pacific is strong enough to win the CPL regular season title? Let's talk that first.
Yeah, I think they are. And I thought the game at the weekend, although it was not a spectacular result on paper, was actually quite impressive from Pacific and made me believe in them more, because they didn't take a lot of players who are key to them to Valor, which is a difficult place to go. You can look at Valor's home record stretching back to last season. They're very solid at IG Fields. And Pacific still look really competitive, not the absolute best version of themselves when this guy's on the pitch, but still a very competitive team that can go away from home to a difficult place and get a result. And what was particularly notable was the worry I had about this team is when you look at the defensive depth, what's beyond Didic and Mejiger. If one of those guys gets injured, how are they going to hold up? And they played a centre-back pairing of 2 young guys in Amadumi and La Jeunesse. And they look competent, right? They look like they can play in this league and hold things together through spells, at least, if one of their 2 main centre-backs is available. So I thought that, along with Kieran Baskett turning in a performance in goal, which just stabilised things in what's been a really ropey few weeks in that position for Pacific. There's a lot of things for James Merriman to feel good about in terms of building out that depth of this team that he's going to need over a 28-game season.
How are you feeling, Wheels? You're nodding your head in agreement?
Yeah, I agree. When you make 8 changes and you go to a difficult spot like Valor, that says something when you come away with a point. And probably based on a handball that wasn't given, they could have come away with the full 3 points. New leaders have emerged in this team. And just to think, the year that they beat Vancouver Whitecaps in this competition was the year that they went on to win the North Star Shield. But looking at that starting 11 in that 4-3 victory at Starlight over Vancouver Whitecaps, only 2 players remain. New goalkeeper, back 4 is gone. 2 or 3 midfielders are gone. It's only Manny Aparicio and Josh Hurd that remain. So what from that starting 11, I mean, Mayer Jaguar was on the bench, but the fact that this team, this is what's so impressive about Pacific. It's my long way around to get to the point. How much turnover they've actually had in their team over the last few years, including a new manager coming in, yet they seem to be finding a way to improve and maybe even become a better version of themselves. It's a little bit like Brighton to a certain degree. They lose a top manager, lose some top players, but they bring in others who take this team forward. That's kind of the way that I look at this Pacific team. They might be actually better than the team that went on and win that championship in 2021. We have a long way to go this season, a long way to go. But I think there's a possibility that that might be the case.
They are taking on a Vancouver side, though, gentlemen, who is sitting in a playoff position right now in MLS in the West, and their winning ways at home continue. We're not going to get into their road record, but at home they continue. 2-0 win against Seattle Sounders. Was that the most impressive win by a Canadian MLS team this season, Wheels?
Probably
just
about. There hasn't been a whole lot. Like to be honest with you, TFC won 2 games. I think both of them came at home. CF Montreal really hasn't beat anyone of at any level for me. So yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, the next step, and we can't avoid the conversation, is the fact that the Whitecaps need to do this away from home as well. Doing this at home, I mean, they've been excellent at BC Place over the last 2 months, and that might be good enough for them to make their way into the playoffs in a pretty competitive spot as well. Win your home games, and they beat one of the top teams in all Major League Soccer in Seattle Sounders, missing a couple players, but still, don't take anything away from the Whitecaps in that game. It was thoroughly deserved. They played really well. And when they go out and play and play that way within themselves, I think that their play on the ball is vastly improved this year. Their midfield is vastly improved. There's a lot to like about the direction that they're going in. Is it complete as of yet? No, but absolutely it's an impressive win and they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it has to be the most impressive win. Like the other contender would be another Whitecaps one, which is 5-0 against Montreal, but Seattle are obviously a much better team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say it is. I think the Vancouver Whitecaps are pretty good. I don't know that I'm ready to go much beyond pretty good right now, but like they are going to be good enough.
I'll go good. You can go good. They're good. They're a good team.
They're inching towards good, I would say. They're good enough at BC Place to make the playoffs. Like they're competitive, they're organized, they're not conceding many goals there. They're starting to be a bit more clinical in front of goal. They've created chances, I think, all season. So they have a foundation in place more so than any other or either of the other two Canadian MLS teams to be a postseason team. I'd be really surprised if that's not the case now. Now, obviously, beyond that, you look at what can they now layer on top of that, to take that next step. Can they become a better away team? Can they consistently get results against teams like Seattle in a way that you can believe when the playoffs come around that this team can be a real contender to get out of the West? I'm not sure I'm quite there with them yet, but they're taking steps in the right direction, and there seems to be certainly a lot of positivity around the group right now.
All right, Ollie. Well, other than telling them to get some good rest and eat a good meal.
Oh, you took my answer.
What are some keys for Pacific to have them be victorious once again, like we saw in 2021 over Vancouver?
Well, I think it's got to look a lot like it did in 2021, right? Like it's a tight pitch at Starlight. It's unusual, I think, for teams that don't play on it often. You've got to make the game kind of chaotic, press them high, unsettle them, force errors playing out the back, things like that. I think the game plan for James Merriman is going to be pretty similar to the one he helped put together under Pame Dukar in that regard, and try and get players like this, Manny Aparicio, Josh Hurd, going the other direction at pace. And I think any team that comes to Starlight has difficulty with that. It's a bit of a different type of Pacific team. I think they're less inclined to play that way and have a bit more kind of patience on the ball and quality on the ball now. But I think it's probably trying to recreate some of the vibes that we felt at Starlight Stadium a couple of years ago.
Well, that was it. The game was like in high speed and never slowed down for a lot of good and bad reasons for the game being played on the pitch. And the crowd was great. It's going to be expanded crowd as well at Starlight Stadium for this game. I can't wait for it. That's going to be Pacific going forward. That's why Didic, Aparicio, Mayer, Jaguar, go through the list of players, didn't make the trip to Winnipeg midweek. They're just looking for this game. They have been eating well. They have been getting their sleep. They have been taking their vitamins. They have been saying their prayers all week long. Like they have to be in maximum form if they're going to get anything out of the Vancouver Whitecaps. I have no problem saying the Whitecaps are the best team left standing, or best team, not even less. They're the best team in Canadian soccer right now. So it's going to be a big challenge, even if Pacific do play their best, to go on and beat the Whitecaps in here. The Whitecaps are still the favorite in this game. Pacific is going to have to come up with something special. Are they capable of that? Absolutely. It wouldn't be a ridiculous, embarrassing upset like it was in 2021 this time around for the Whitecaps. I think that they've just, Pacific's a better team, and it's a much more compelling matchup. But let's see. I cannot wait for this game. It's going to be outstanding. Crowd's going to be great. Has all the ingredients for being like one of those truly memorable Canadian Championship Cup ties.
We cannot forget to get a good night's sleep and take our vitamins, which, by the way, you just reminded me I forgot to take my vitamin D, hence why I'm like a little bit. So cannot forget to do that tomorrow, because it's a double header, everybody, here on OneSoccer. We're very excited about that. So remember, the earlier match, you have Forge taking on CF Montreal. Late match will be Pacific, Vancouver Whitecaps, Eastern time when I say late match, because everyone in the West, I know, still early for you.